Right. Um, Juan Pon Sorry about the voice. Juan Ponce Enrile is a controversial figure in Philippine politics and in Philippine history. Uh, his name is met by usually a mixed reaction, particularly if you had asked about him uh, in previous years. Uh, it depends on a sitting administration. The opinions about JPE can get very extreme, with some calling him the devil incarnate, and on the other end, people saying that this is possibly the smartest lawyer, smartest guy walking around now. Others call him living, breathing, walking bit of Philippine history. But whether you like this guy or not, he has a lot to say. And admittedly, uh, the guy is whip smart. Sharp, 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 sharp. Yesterday, Mark Lopez, Ethel Pineda, myself, and Prosecutor Darwin Cañete interviewed Senator Enrile, candidate Enrile, on not just his run, but on things like his personal history and his role in Philippine history. So, some of the highlights of that interview were, well, first of all, how do you feel? How old are you? He said he was 96. He says he counts his age in the Chinese way. So we understand that some uh, Chinese count even the number of months that you are inside the womb. So a 95-year-old person would consider himself 96, counting the months that he in utero. So which we found interesting, but even just as interesting is why he wants to run. Basically, what he's saying is that he still has much to offer. He would like to review some of the laws currently in existence, such as, well, one of the things that he had mentioned was the rice tariffication law. He's rather concerned about its effect on the farmers. He's also concerned about universal health care. In general, he's concerned about, excuse me, consumer rights. And we know that, as a fact, that in previous previous elections, he had used the slogan, gusto ko happy ka. And on that note, we know that he batted for greater consumer rights in relation to electricity. And when informed about a new emerging super franchise on alternative energy, in particular solar energy, the first thing he said was, I think, given another term, I'm going to review that. So on that one, we're very greatly heartened. But more than this were the more interesting stories. One of the things that I asked him was, um, how did you meet your father? He said that he was in Cagayan, and his brothers and sisters from the marriage of his father with his, according to him, first wife, because his father had many wives, uh, were in the area and wanted to meet him. So they had the opportunity to do that. And when they got home, they were on vacation. And then when they got home, they informed their father that they had met their kuya. So his father asked a detective uh, to meet, to look for him, because the meeting with his brothers and sisters was a chance encounter. His father then had him tracked down, located, and then eventually asked him to join the family in Manila. At this time, Senator Enrile had been kicked out of his high school for getting into a brawl. Um, he had been working, and according to him, the war, in addition to getting kicked out, the war also interrupted his studies. So he graduated high school at the age of 23. Which I find heartening for those of us who are back to school at far more advanced ages. I asked Senator Enrile also about his... I also asked him about him being called the architect of martial law, at least the initial martial law under President Marcos, whom he had served. And he said, I am not the architect of martial law. The people are, because we placed it in our constitution, which again is another interesting thing. So I asked him about it. So how did you do it? Because the 1973 Constitution was silent. It's not like the 86 Constitution kung saan makikita natin na very specific ang tungkol sa deklarasyon sa martial law, anong mga basehan nito, etc. I'm wondering why we don't have any comments. Okay. So, feel free to comment. It doesn't appear that anybody's even commenting. Okay, anyway, continue. So, he said that he based his draft of presidential declaration, a proclamation 1081, which is the declaration of martial law by President Marcos in 1972, on the powers of the executive. And he did his research looking into foreign laws and other jurisdictions, and he said that, well, it is in fact the power of the president to call out the military or the police in times when he has to deal with issues of public order. So it is a means of, and I was correct here. Remember, I was posting about martial law, and we said that martial law is a way, a means for the state to protect itself, for the government to protect its existence. So, and he is right, and he placed this solely as a power of the executive to do so. Why are we talking about Juan Ponce Enrile? Because he's running again for the Senate. And some of his personal history and his participation in martial law are some of the things that people often judge him on, myself included. For the longest time, his name struck fear in the hearts of activists. He's the person who crafted 1081, Proclamation 1081, that saw a lot of activists and rebels being imprisoned during the martial law years. But a lot then of our impressions are also based on what period of history or what president is sitting when the characterization is made. For example, during the Cory years, it was very clear that he was first demonized. I can't see the comments. First he was demonized, and then he was later on included in the Cory cabinet. Oh wait, what account am I on? I can't see my comments. Okay, anyway, I'm trying to find out why I don't have comments on my broadcast. Erg. Okay, I don't know if I'm doing this right, or maybe I'm in another account. Okay. Anyway, back to the kwento. Okay. So, the point I'm making here is that there is so much controversy about this person. And a lot of the impressions are created by what we hear about him. And those impressions are created by what we hear about him based also on the personal experiences of the persons who have given us their opinion about this person. The long and short of it, this is my second interview with Senator Enrile. And the long and short of it is, there's one thing that nobody can argue with me about this person, is that he is intelligent, way intelligent, beyond uh, well, he's no mere mortal when it comes to knowing the laws. He's very, very good at it, and he keeps constantly updated, a necessary thing for any lawyer worth his or her salt. Baka daw na-swipe ko yung comments. Okay. I'm looking at the comments on my laptop. How did I swipe the screen? Swipe to reveal comments. But I did, and it's not showing up. There! Okay, now I can see your comments. Alright. Thank you very much for the suggestions. Alright. So, during the Cory years, even Cory Aquino herself was very ambivalent about Senator Enrile, about candidate Enrile. First, she was angry. She told people about this, that during the EDSA revolution, Mr. Enrile at the time was holed up in Camp Aguinaldo and asked for the intervention of people who were already gathering in EDSA because they knew that they were already under the gun. Cory had initially not wanted to call out to assist them or to help them because she remembered how difficult it was to visit Ninoy in jail, her husband. So she said she was always harassed during that time, and in fact was having a difficult time. Of course, during that time it was very difficult for her. It was a difficult period in her life, di ba? Nakakulong si Ninoy, she was bringing up the kids, the family was under fire, they were in the opposition, etc. So eventually it ended up that, if I'm not mistaken, Cardinal Sin, who called out for people to mass around that area to protect, to buffer the rebels holed up in Camp Aguinaldo, and among those rebels was Mr. Enrile himself. Those who are saying they're voting or not voting for JPE, excuse me, I'm not doing this for that. I'm just telling you my interview with him. Not asking you to vote for him yet, but I'm giving you the results of that interview. Okay? So, please lang, whether you vote for him or not, actually I've not called on anybody to tell me their list of voters or anything like that on this page, because we still have to study how the COMELEC is going to act on their resolution about monitoring certain bloggers as to whether or not they will be considered as agents of various candidates. Hence, the lack of please vote for in any of my lives or any of my postings. Earlier, prior to the campaign period, I did make an endorsement of two people, in particular Attorney Glenn Chong and Attorney Larry Gadon, but we will continue to make evaluations of their platforms on this page and evaluations of platforms of other candidates. So please lang, I don't really need, I'm not asking you yet to make any kind of vote for any candidate right now. So your is superfluous. Sabi ni si Neb Aike, sana tinanong ninyo what made JPE decide to vote to impeach Corona. We actually did, and the person who had asked that question was Prosecutor Darwin Cañete. I had asked him that in a previous interview, and he said the exact same thing. According to him, he had warned Justice Corona about taking the stand. He didn't have to. Tama yun. Or he could take the stand but refuse to answer questions. Instead, Justice Corona chose to answer questions nga. And one of the statements that he made was, supposedly he admitted that he had about 2 million pesos allegedly in his bank account. Okay? So, that for him was the deciding factor. I'm not making any judgments here, ha? I'm just telling you what he said, and how later on I will tell you how we appreciate it. Okay? Alright. I'm also not saying na everything that Senator Enrile says is true, but at least on the factual matters that he was narrating, a lot of it can still be seen, in the record. Because I was asking him primarily about things that we can check on. So, one of those things was, of course, the Corona impeachment I had asked in the first one, and this one was asked by Prosecutor Darwin Cañete. One of the funnier moments during the time that we were interviewing him was asking him his opinion on, well, of course, since the impeachment was brought up, we asked about Justice Sereno. We didn't, he said it was very simple. For him, the issue was very simple. You either have a salian or you don't. And if you don't, then why would you be allowed to continue in your position when the salian is required to be submitted prior to taking your oath of office? So, which I found was a good point, but had been previously discussed. This led us now to a question of what about Trillanes' amnesty or possible non-amnesty. And his reaction was, let's not talk about unimportant people, or some words to that effect, that he's not important enough to be discussed. He didn't say it that way. More like, let's not talk about the unimportant. And I found it really, really funny because at the start of the interview, what he was saying was that, ask me any question. But bringing up the name of Senator Trillanes caused him to laugh and be dismissive about him. Yun, sabi ni Doc Ethel, sabi ni JPE, Trillanes, who is Trillanes? Sino ba yun? Indicating a lack of importance on his part. But he did say that amnesty is a contract between the state and the person seeking the amnesty. So, yun. And if you fail to live up to the requirements of that contract, then that contract is, then you are in breach, and you can be penalized for that. So, yeah. So that was an interesting aspect of the interview. I was interested in it because I am of the opinion, and this is just an opinion, that I don't know what weight you're going to put on it, that the amnesty is invalid. And we've discussed that in previous lives. So, I'm looking at your comments. Hello to everybody who has just tuned in. So, he also discussed his previous cases. And when we say his previous cases, because two of us there were interested in his litigation record. And apparently, Mr. Enrile not only remembers his cases, he remembers practically everything. He remembers the name of the counsel he had opposed. He remembers the name of the judge, the name of his client, the name of his opponent, the names of the witnesses, and the outcome of the case. So that's the easy part. Pero the details, some of my cases, I don't even remember anymore. And I have clients, former clients saying, you represented me, and I have to ask, did we win? But this guy, he knows, he remembers everything. I'm not saying that he's telling the truth in everything. Some of the stories that he told us, we don't have enough information yet to determine whether or not he's telling the truth. But the point here is that on the things that we asked him, he remembers. Now, one other thing that I remember him telling was about the Bataan nuclear power plant. And he said, and this is interesting, he said that it was advanced ahead of his time, and he does support plans to revive it. He said that one of the purposes in bringing in a nuclear power plant was to ensure a certain kind of independence when it came to power supply. We were thoroughly dependent on fossil fuels, and a nuclear plant would give us uh, stability and the continuity of supply that was necessary for economic development. But he also mentioned that the other purpose of this was to eventually have our own nuclear bomb, nuclear weapons. And suddenly this opens up a whole new perspective. Marcos was interested, or the Marcos government was interested in nuclear weapons. So, he mentioned that currently Pakistan, a country as small as us and possibly in the same state of development, has its own nuclear warhead. uh, the, the possibilities on this, the our evaluation now of the Marcos years has to include this sort of information. Marcos's idea was, well, a lot of the information given to us during the Aquino years uh, was indicated that Marcos's main interest in being in government was to steal, was to remain in power, was to be a dictator, etc. But very little it was discussed about what his plans were for the country. And this gives us a different perspective. In other words, this guy was also looking towards the future. Whether you agree with nuclear weaponry or not, he was looking at developing the country and developing it at par or at pace with Western countries. He was looking at nuclear weaponry. He was looking at nuclear energy. He was looking, and these indicate that he was looking for to make us far more independent from Western countries than we initially thought. And the swing in the Aquino administration towards what appears to be far greater dependence on the U.S. is palpable. It's interesting. Diba? Again, this is not enough information to pass final judgment on whether or not Marcos was good for us or not. But this is certainly interesting for Senator Enrile to bring up. It's interesting that he relates that the development was from forms of energy, not saying stable in the sense of nuclear instability, stable but steady forms of energy, making us a lot less dependent on fuel imports, and then later on a lot less dependent on the provision of the U.S. Of our armaments by the United States. So, diba, gives you something to think about. Ganito yung mga kailangan nating impormasyon tungkol sa ating kasaysayan, particularly about the Marcos years, because we have been only hearing one side. Whether or not this side is supported by other documents or other evidence that these things actually happened is another thing, but it does give us perspective, which is important during these elections. Right now, we're talking about Senator Enrile, not simply as candidate Enrile, but Enrile as a participant in Philippine history and part of certainly a big factor in shaping that history. Let me see. Joy Peralta asked, did he talk about how Marcos was as a president? I was too young then. He actually did. He said that he was not vengeful. Before martial law was declared, according to Mr. Enrile, before martial law was declared, he was telling the story about when Marcos was being asked to give some kind of report about the state of the nation, and there was some kind of a parliament of the streets where the rallyists were demanding that members of the cabinet speak to them and account themselves to them. And Senator Enrile at the time, who was the Secretary of Justice, refused, and the and at that time there were some of them, of the members of the cabinet, in conference with Marcos when rallyists stormed into Malacanang. Enrile, quote unquote, escaped, that's my term, not his, Malacanang, crossed the Pasig because he refused to be interrogated by the rallyists. We asked the question, how did they get in? The rallyists stormed Malacanang and managed, they managed to get in. So how did they get in? Weren't they any guards? And Enrile said Marcos told the guards not to use violence on the rallyists, and if they were insistent, they started climbing the fence. So they were just simply allowed in. And he gave us that perspective of Marcos' personality. He said he did not want to use violence on the rallyists, which again makes us question the image of President Marcos in the Cory years and what appears in the history books now. In addition to which, it gave us an opportunity to remember the scenario of General Ver asking President Marcos to bomb or start shooting people in EDSA, and it was President Marcos who said no. And he was dismissive, and this was televised. So again, this is something that we have to think about in making an evaluation of the Marcos years. Am I saying that that my impression of JPE, born during martial law and in the subsequent years, has changed? Yes, it has. Am I going to give him a free pass about the martial law years? No, not yet. Not yet. His stand during the martial law years was that, of course, you had to arrest people who were committing rebellion. Of course, you had to take them into custody. But he does not give a free pass either to the abuses committed during that period. This was from a previous interview. In his previous interview, he said that the state protects itself, so you have to go after the people who are attacking the state. And I agree with that. But the question of human rights abuses is another matter that we need to explore with with objectivity and evidence. We have the narrative of the Aquino years. This now must be balanced with the narrative of those who participated on the other side. And so for me, my impression again holds that Senator Enrile is a wellspring of historical information and new perspective. And I like that about him. I like also that he was fairly, he was dispassionate, meaning rather objective, even in his tone, in making his narrative, in telling us his stories. And I like that also about him. Am I pro Enrile? That's still a far more difficult question to answer. But this much I can tell you. This is a very interesting person, very intelligent, and he has so much still left to tell us. So much also that he can give us as a lawyer. This guy is no pushover. And he was talking law like he was updated, and he was. This guy is far more updated about developments in law than, than I am. And then so many other lawyers. And so that's the one part. I don't expect him to tell us portions of Philippine history which will not portray him in a good light. I don't expect that, and I don't expect anybody to actually do that. So for those parts of history where he is the villain, we have to look a little, we have to dig further. We cannot ask him to provide information on his faults and feelings, though he has been fairly objective in most of his kwento. And so I think that this is somebody worth talking to continuously. Somebody that I would like to see, to hear from even more. So thank you very much again for listening in on our live Facebook live today. We will talk more about this, and we'll be making more posts on Luminous about our interview with him. Hopefully we can interview other people too, but this guy is utterly fascinating to me. Again, no free passes on whether or not he has failings to the Filipino people. We will strive for the kind of objectivity also that he has shown us. And thank you very much again. This is a lot for us to think about. Take it how you will. Again, not asking you, trying to get you to change your mind about him or to think about him the way I do. But at least consider the stuff that he can still tell us. And thank you very much. We'll be seeing you soon.